Just imagine a world without studio experimentation, band rivalries that nearly start wars, guitar driven anthems, and adrenaline pumping, sometimes heavily drawn out drum and guitar solos. It's hard to picture, right? Well, we owe much of what we know as modern rock to four young men from Liverpool. The Beatles didn't just change music, they transformed pop culture, fashion, attitudes, and the very structure of popular songwriting and song making. If you've ever listened to a rock song and thought it sounded quirky, bold, or artistic, well, the chances are that the Beatles did it first. As someone who spent years studying music and diving into the legacy of classic rock bands and finding out just what makes them so great, I've come to realize that the Beatles created the blueprint for much of the modern rock that we enjoy today. So, today, I'll show you how the Beatles' innovations shaped the sound, structure, and the spirit of modern rock music. First, we'll start with how they revolutionized songwriting and studio recording. Then we'll move on to their impact on rock band structure and genre expansion. And finally, we'll touch on their lasting influence on today's artists. Before the Beatles, pop songs followed a pretty standard pattern. The Beatles mixed things up with unexpected chord progressions and key changes. Songs like A Day in the Life blurred the lines between pop, rock, and even orchestral music at times. They were also known to be very experimental in the studio. They pioneered techniques like multi-track recording, reverse tape effects, and artificial double tracking. Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band are landmark albums in using the studio space itself as an instrument. An example of this would be Tomorrow Never Knows, which used tape loops and sitars, unheard of in rock at the time. Another great example is Strawberry Fields, where they used that weird fluty thing. I still don't know what it is, but it sounded really cool. They also redefined what it meant to be a rock band. They used a self-contained band model, which meant that the Beatles wrote their own music, played their own instruments, and harmonized together as one. This inspired later bands like the Rolling Stones, Nirvana, and the Foo Fighters to do the same. Another way they redefined what it meant to be a rock band was that they shifted the focus from singles to albums. Before them, music was all about singles, and the next big thing. The Beatles made the album the main artistic statement, a format still followed by many artists today. Their influence on future artists and genres was overwhelming. I mean, talk about their genre bending and diversity. They mixed rock with Indian music, classical elements, folk, and even psychedelic music, which they were heavily involved in the conception of. This laid the ground floor for experimental rock and even alternative genres. Again, like I said, their impact on artists today was insane. Artists from Oasis, whose influence from the Beatles is so heavily present that it's even hard to tell the two apart sometimes, to even Taylor Swift, who couldn't be further from the Beatles, both cite the Beatles as major influences in their musical careers. Paul McCartney's bass playing alone redefined the role of a bassist in a rock band. It meant that you could keep a rhythm and still be the star of the show, and you didn't have to play in the back with your head down. In conclusion, we looked at how the Beatles revolutionized songwriting and production, reshaped what it meant to be a rock band, and opened the doors to genre blending, all of which deeply influenced modern rock. Even though the Beatles haven't played so much as a note together in over 50 years, their fingerprints are all over the music we consume today. They didn't just write songs, they set the standard and wrote the laws for any successful rock band or pop group today. That was my speech. Thank you for listening.